Hi everyone, this is the lecture that we would have had in class on the Friday before Thanksgiving, and hopefully you get a chance to watch all of this before returning after Thanksgiving. Hope you have a great break. This lecture is about office environments. When you think about the things that we've talked about, the way the different types of people that use office environments, and you think about how many offices are out there in the world, how many people, everybody works in different jobs and different kinds of offices. This is really an important topic when you think about work environments. So one of the fundamental things is that every business is unique, and they need an environment that supports them in the way that they do business. If you think about how the differences between a law office or a doctor's office or some sort of a public agency, everybody does things in a very different way, and they serve different purposes. An interior designer may specialize in office design, but that might have a really wide range of solutions, design solutions. One of the other true things about business is that you will have a very diverse group of people who are working in an office together for many hours for a common goal. Often these are complete strangers that would probably not necessarily like each other or be friends with each other, but they're all in the same work environment. You remember that Professor Kaup talked about how with the baby boomers aging and also staying in the workplace for a longer period of time, we have, a lot of age diversity, and then a lot of gender and culture diversity, as well as diverse abilities that everyone has. So the environment that people work in has to satisfy the needs of all of these different people. And on top of that, workplaces are rapidly evolving. Business is changing so quickly. There are new technologies that become available. I designed in a time when before Ethernet or Internet, everything was Ethernet. Everything had to be connected, wired. And now with Wi-Fi, that doesn't that isn't a problem so much anymore. So things are rapidly changing. There are new businesses being developed. There are economic changes in the world. But then there are also sort of the age-old problems of humanity, just kind of people who aren't necessarily easy to work with. They are dysfunctional human beings in their own personal lives, and they bring that dysfunction to the work office. You'll have people who are power hungry or want to control other people. You have people who are workaholics and other people who don't want to work at all. You have this need for collegiality, which basically means you are looking out for each other and helping each other out as much as you can. So there's this huge range of sort of human needs that are part of the workplace. In 2013, so this is about 4 years old, Gensler is the largest architecture interior design firm in the world, and they did a study about workplace design. And what they found out is that workers in the United States have a hard time working effectively within the environments, and that effectiveness had fallen since 2008. And my guess is that that has continued with the way that we are trying to put more people into a smaller amount of space. And so the question is why? Why is that the case? There are a lot of reasons that Gensler talks about, but they talk about how this idea that people are expected to work longer hours, longer work days, often leads to them working less effectively. There are so many distractions between phones that are buzzing and emails coming and all kinds of things that grab our attention and do pull us away from what we're concentrating on. And we've talked about this when we talked about the brain. Multitasking is a myth. When you get interrupted, your brain has to stop doing one thing and go to something else, and it takes longer to come back and work hard again. We also have real estate getting more and more expensive. And so one of the ways that business owners are trying to save money is to put more people into a smaller amount of space. Here's a quote from the Gensler survey. Cramming people in does have an impact on effectiveness. Just because you can see your colleagues doesn't mean you're going to collaborate with them. So there's a lot of things that are done saying this is a better thing because you can see each other and talk to each other easily, but that doesn't necessarily happen. There are all kinds of different workspaces that are out there. There are primary workspaces like that are individual offices where people can work with sort of a heads down concentration. There are other kinds of alternative workspaces that might house 1 to 4 people where they can close the door and have it be quiet. This might be like a conference room. But what Gensler found out is that what employees like the most is when they're given a choice of workspaces. The employers that are seen as being innovative, that have higher performing employees, offer a lot of different options to their employees. So you might have quiet spaces where you can work when you're doing one thing, and they have open spaces where you can work when you're doing other things. You might have the ability to kind of move around the office and work with other people. So that kind of choice is seen as being innovative. So let's step back and talk a little bit about the history of office environments. Traditionally, offices, businesses have been very hierarchical. You've got the boss, you've got the mid-management, you've got the lower management, you've got the worker bees at the bottom, and it's been very sort of vertically managed, and information travels up and down the chain of command. So somebody at the bottom might have a good idea, but by the time it gets up to the big boss, it's been changed or somebody else has taken credit for it. So it's a very inefficient way of working. In 1900, we had this innovation of Taylorism, named after the gentleman Taylor who came up with the idea. And this was this idea of sort of an assembly line, having someone watching over and making sure that everybody's efficient and that things go right. So you'd have these, offices full of people in the middle doing the work and someone watching over them and making sure that they're working and, trying to make it a very efficient kind of business. So here are some images. Some of these are actually kind of famous images. This image on the right, you'll hear a little bit more about this, but this image on the right was a groundbreaking kind of design by Frank Lloyd Wright. But you can see from this top image on the left here, it's very old, but this is what offices looked like initially. They were just these big open offices with desks placed in them and everybody sort of working out in the open. This image down here is sort of an evolution of that, just kind of tables spread around that people can work at. But when we have Taylorism, when we have this hierarchy, you have this emphasis on inequality. You have a huge difference between incomes, obviously, from the lower level to the upper echelons. And you know who the boss is, and you know that you do what the boss tells you to do. Don't often think for yourself. You just kind of do the work. And often this is like on an assembly line, it means that you segment the job into tasks. So one person is responsible for a part of the job and doesn't really see the big picture and see how improvements could be made. This often leads to a very profitable earning model, but probably not a very pleasant environment to work in, because power is with ownership and leadership, and those at the lower levels feel like they don't have any power or control at all. Now, this way of working is fairly stable, but it's very inflexible. Change is incredibly slow, and it's all about control and managing efficiency. It's a very different kind of model than where we have evolved to, which is a more collaborative structure, where people are working together as teams and managing things more from the start to the end so that you can see how things are interrelated. And you might have input, democratic input into how things are done. This is definitely becoming more popular all of the time. Whether it's as common as a hierarchical model or not, I'm not sure. At this point, it may be as common, if maybe even growing, becoming more common as people are recognizing that employees that have a role, a say in what they do, can often be really beneficial to a company. This is still coming of age, and people are learning, and sometimes there's resistance against it, but certainly this is kind of where we're headed. So as businesses change, workspaces have changed too. So in the traditional form of doing business, we had a lot of private offices, people who could shut their doors and put their heads down and do their work, and you fought for who got the best office. You know, did I get the corner office? Do I have the biggest office? Is my office smaller? I will tell you, I have seen grown people go into their new space with measuring tapes just to make sure that their office is not any smaller than their neighbor's office. It can get really petty. It's remarkable. And then we have the open offices, and which have evolved through a number of stages, from cubicles to benches to all kinds of different things. Now, which one do you think uses more square footage? Yeah, the traditional office uses a lot more space. Which one is more flexible? Definitely the open office. Things can move around. It's not brick and mortar that is hard to move. This visual connection to coworkers is also greater in a more open office, and that can be a good or a bad thing. You might want to see other people. Bosses might want to be able to watch everyone, but sometimes there's lack of visual privacy and it's hard to work. So privacy is definitely more often found in a traditional office, which again could be a good or a bad thing. Prestige is often seen in a more traditional office. Often, even in progressive offices, open offices, the bosses still have private spaces. It takes a pretty charismatic leader to say, I don't get an open office. I don't need anything more than my employees do. That's still a pretty rare thing to find. Private offices also lead to more ability to personalize and make the space your own. If I were to take a video here in my office, I'm sitting right here in a workstation that is covered with pictures of family and trips, things that are important to me. So I've made this office my own. That's a little harder to do in an open office. Some people, there is some opportunity of personalization, but sometimes bosses even discourage that. So when we moved from the private office, it happened, that move really began in the 1960s when the cubicle was designed. And these became dividers, these wall systems, cubicle systems that had these divider walls that gave some visual privacy from those open bullpens of just rows upon desks. Now you could kind of have your own space and be less distracted. Cubicles really got a bad name fairly quickly. They became the symbol of corporate oppression, and the open office didn't do much to eliminate hierarchy, because the cubicles were where the peons worked, the worker bees worked, and the bosses typically still got closed offices. Dilbert cartoons are always talking about cubicles, and they were, you know, lots of cartoons about office life. Let you read that. So the equation between cubicles and cages has often been used. In the 60s, a man by the name of Robert Proust, this man right here, came up with his Action Office cubicle that he designed for Herman Miller, which is a big furniture manufacturer still to this day. And this system, known as Action Office, you see down here there are a lot of different flexible parts that could be used in different ways. People could personalize their offices to make them work the way that they wanted them to. They could be taken down, they could be put back up together in different ways. So cubicles really became the norm, the way of doing business, really through the 90s. So for years, what we would find in an office is this kind of a layout. So looking at this plan, I'm going to just explain what you're looking at. All along the outside here are windows. This is a floor plan of, say, just one floor of an office building. These are the elevators here in the middle and the bathrooms, right? So this is a tall building because I've got lots of elevators here. And what would happen is all around the perimeter, you would have nice offices. So here at the corner is probably where the boss's offices are. And then, you know, sort of mid-management offices, and depending, this guy's not quite as important as this guy because he has a smaller office, right? And then in the middle, you have all the little worker bees in their cubicles. And initially, these would even have been solid walls along here, so no natural light would get into the middle of the cubicles. We got a little bit smarter about that, and now you can see that, I don't know if you can see, but there are some windows all along here that allow the natural light to come all the way through so that people sitting in these cubicles still get some natural light. And that was, you know, how most people were working, as I said, into the 90s. So here are images of what that looked like. This overhead view here, you can see these little boxes that people are in, much smaller spaces than a full office. You would never build an office that little. It would look like a closet, but you could put a person in a cubicle that feels like a closet. And here's a really great example of this anonymity. I mean, how do you find people in offices that look like this? Everything looks the same, and was, you know, you'd have these rows upon rows upon rows of cubicles. I want to point out these things because, again, before we had Wi-Fi, everybody had to be wired, and so you'd have these posts every so often that would allow people's computers to be hardwired. Here are some more views. Here you can see those perimeter offices that have glass along the front, and if the windows are open, then that light can come through here to the cubicles. And then here's another view. This one, it looks like we have some private offices, but we also have some cubicles here. Maybe our windows are running along the side here. Oops, pushed too hard. Maybe we've got windows over here, but we've got some natural light coming into the middle of the space. So as the hierarchy of office life began to break down, so we had fewer people in perimeter offices, this is what you ended up getting, are these offices. And I know that this is a bad copy, but this is, these are all windows along here, and then cubicles that have natural access to natural light coming in there. And the same thing here, you've got windows, oops, windows coming along here, and then cubicles with natural light. And probably these people along the window walls here are your mid-management people with a little bit more prestige and authority. So here's some examples of that. More natural light coming in, but still pretty anonymous cubicles. And really, most businesses wanted their cubicles to be very similar from one person to the next so that there was a lot of flexibility. If you order a lot of different parts and pieces, then they're hard to reuse. So everybody had the same work surface, the same cubicle height, the same binder bins right here. Everybody has sort of the same thing. Here's another sort of evolution of the process where you still have some offices around the perimeter, but you also have some open spaces, conference rooms and things that allow some light through. But clearly this person back here, even though that's an enclosed office, has no access to natural light. You know, we have this waiting area here, and but basically from here over, not a lot of natural light is going to make it through. Here are some other examples. So instead of having cubicles, we've now started working with full height walls. So these wall systems are actually partitions that can be taken in, taken up, taken down. They have complete with glass and complete with doors. You can see that they allow a lot of light in. Here I am a long way from that window over here, but I can get quite a bit of natural light into the space. So these sort of, they're called demountable partitions, are an option to full walls that are built with chipboard. These are probably more expensive than building an office with chipboard and solid doors, but they are more flexible. And now we've evolved to cubicles that sort of begin to disappear. The heights get lower until you get something that looks like this. These are known as benches, and they are made to have people in even smaller amounts of space, and they were designed in an effort to have more collaboration. But often people who work in environments like this just end up putting headphones on and trying their best not to be distracted by everyone else. So I'm going to now offer an alternative viewpoint to how offices are being designed today. Now, it may be true that if a designer really knows and understands how to design well, you can get away with open spaces as long as you have some closed spaces and some choice. But not everybody does that. And that's the point that is made in this video. If I can get it to open up. Okay.
Our Thanksgivings used to be small.
Wait for the
Now look at us. It amazes me.
Skip.
Stop. How did open offices get so overrated? Let's break this down. We all know open offices are bad. There have been studies that show that private offices clearly outperformed open ones. Open offices are about saving money. Pricey real estate means that every square foot's a dollar sign, and that's fine. But we don't like to talk about it that way. We act like it's about interaction and collaboration, even though studies have shown that ease of interaction is not an issue in any type of office. To be clear, I'm throwing stones from a glass office.
This is where I work. My desk is incredibly close to my poor neighbors. I always have to wear headphones to concentrate, and nobody ever talks.
But when you look at really cool companies, across the board, they all have open offices to encourage interaction and openness. Dog vacation website, open office. Charity website, open office. But this is not just penny pinching. We talk about them like they're better, and they used to be. Open offices were once works of art. They were just ruined by too many bad copies. This is an open office. It's a post office from 1872. Open offices weren't invented by hip millennials. This is not a barista. This is not a feng shui consultant. Clerical work was done in big open spaces as early as the 1750s. But small rooms were most common. By the 1900s, more and more people were spending their days in offices. One genius wanted to make offices more open, and he wanted open spaces to work better.
The eminent American architect, Frank Lloyd Wright.
Come in, lad. Instead of a building being a series of boxes and closets, became more and more open, more and more sense of space.
Wright's known for his houses, often with open plans, but he designed offices too. In 1909, he experimented with open offices in a Buffalo building. In 1939, he created a masterpiece in Wisconsin. The S.C. Johnson Company needed a new headquarters, so they asked Wright to design it. They make cleaning products like
Raid! Yes, Raid! New bug killer discovery from Johnson's Wax.
The administrative building was the highlight. It was a stunning open office. Wright believed new materials, like steel, enabled bolder designs.
The box was a fascist symbol, and the architecture of freedom and democracy needed something beside the box.
Just in case you missed that, he just said boxes are fascist. Yeah. Doesn't that sound a lot like modern open office hype? But there were big differences between what Wright made and what we have today. This thing was incredibly well designed. First are these dendriform columns. Dendriform means tree-like. They were so elegantly skinny they worried building inspectors. The ceiling let in natural light. Visitors compared it to a cathedral. Wright also specially designed each of these desks and chairs. Just look at all the space between them. And managers got private offices on a mezzanine. Wright said that it paid off.
One of the first consequences was tea in the afternoon. And they didn't like to go home.
But Wright's open office was very different from the open drudgery in, say, 1960s The Apartment. People eliminated Wright's careful design work and made a copy of a copy of a copy. Open, but without Wright's genius behind it. That's why people thought a cubicle might be the solution. The May 1968 issue of Progressive Architecture has a lot of gems. Like this flooring that's asbestos tile? Hindsight 2020 probably should have gone with linoleum. Page 174 has a spread about a movement called Bürolandschaft. It means office landscape and started in Germany in the 1950s. By the 60s, it had made its way to America. Look at this diagram of DuPont Chemical's boxy, very organized offices before Bürolandschaft. And now look at the fluid, organic layout they ended up with. The idea was to make offices open, but keep them flexible. Herman Miller did the same with their Action Office.
Now, what exactly is Action Office? Well, I'm walking through it right now.
Herman Miller's Robert Probst designed it to break up space, but it allowed for easy interaction and rearrangement. There were even special task groups for each part of the office. The idea was constant flexibility with specifically designed furniture. But when people copied Bürolandschaft and Action Office, they forgot the flexibility and attention to detail. They only saw the walls. So over the decades, we got a copy of a copy of a copy, and went from thoughtful design to cubicle farm.
We'll go ahead and get this all fixed up for you. Great.
Today's supposedly hip open offices are, in part, a reaction to cubicle hatred. But many lack the care and attention of the open offices of Frank Lloyd Wright, or the partitioned privacy of Herman Miller and Bürolandschaft. We've kind of got the worst of both worlds. The open offices we have are overrated bullpens, but the idea is worth executing well. Because it matters too much to stop trying to fix it.
By that we mean the 40 hours a week, the 87,000 hours, the nearly 10 full years of your life you spend inside the four walls of one room.
Okay, that's great.
So I don't want to leave you with the impression that Frank Lloyd Wright's open office was perfect. His custom-designed three-legged chairs turned out to be kind of unstable, and they were eventually replaced.
There we go. Now we're done.
Stop. How did open offices get so overrated? Let's break it.
Sorry about that. Get rid of that. Get back to our PowerPoint. Okay, so I love that because it kind of gives you a little bit of history of office design and how we've gotten to where we are right now. So where we are right now is exploring a lot of different things, trying to create open spaces, private spaces, places that people can go when they need privacy, but then open areas where they can work as well. If you look at this office, this is, we have a little private area here where you can even shut the doors. You can see that door could shut there. We have open bench area here, other private areas here, and conference room. So we're trying to do a lot of different things with our design. Just by the way, this bench right here is the same famous bench that sits in the halls of Justin Hall, right? There's one not far outside of my office. It's known as the Nelson bench. It's kind of a famous mid-century modern classic. But you see offices like this getting written up all the time. And as I look at this furniture, this is in Taipei, China. This guy's sitting on a ball, and these guys, I mean, boy, does that look like a comfortable piece of furniture or not? So we have to be really careful about not just throwing out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. We think that open offices, collaboration is good, but this is probably not a very productive place to work. So we're going to talk just a little bit about office culture as well. Office culture, when we talk about that, what we're meaning are the sort of the rules of conduct, those social norms or those behavior settings that are appropriate kinds of behavior, those understandings that take place within an office. Some of you may have worked in places that have a great positive culture where there's lots of support and appreciation. Some of you may work in a place of negative culture where you've got some power-hungry person that's making everybody else's life miserable. These ideas of people getting along within an office really make a huge difference. Do you have people with big egos, big ambition, make a big difference in how office life works. I'm not going to worry about that conference call and real life thing. But I did want to spend a minute talking about, what are the elements of a positive workplace culture? So when you graduate from school and you go out and work for a company, you need to look for these things. You're getting interviewed and you hope that they offer you a job, but you're interviewing them as well. And you want to make sure that employees are treated fairly and they have all of the resources that they need to be successful. You want to make sure that the environment is safe, that you have good indoor air quality, that there aren't a lot of off-gassing elements. You want to make sure that your boss cares about that workplace environment. You're looking for an environment where employees are given a large amount of responsibility, that they can make choices once they know what's going on and they can see the big picture. They have an opportunity to contribute, and by doing so that they can improve in status and in recognition, so that there's some incentive to really try to improve things and to do better all of the time. The other thing that can be really positive are sort of common social experiences. Now, in today's world, this has been a two-edged sword. There's been this idea of, I see those people every day, all day at work. I'm not going to go out to social events with them, to the opposite end of that, which is where you work with people and then you go and like club with people all in the evenings, and you have too personal of a relationship. So you do have to have some things where you have an opportunity to not just be working together, but to associate together, but not necessarily be each other's best friends. We then also have this idea of working from home. And with today's technologies, people who are entrepreneurs, people who have families at home, or there are a lot of people who work out of their homes. This can be a really good thing, but there can be some bad things as well. So you are starting to see a lot of what is called co-working, where there are spaces that are available to be leased, but you can, even if you're an entrepreneur just on your own doing something, you can go into a space and rent a desk in a space and just be in a social situation where you can see other people. So if I want to be able to leave work behind, I can do that more easily in a workplace. When I'm working from home, your work is always around you, and sometimes that starts to be overwhelming. However, it's a lot more flexible, and you can work, when the kids go to bed instead of from 9 to 5. But there can be conflicting family and work demands. I remember trying to work out of my home with a small child and being on the phone with a client as a baby starts to cry. That often got difficult. Often our workplaces, our employers will invest more in quality furniture, so you might have healthier furniture. And I don't know which way the arrow should go on this way. So I think workplace environments can be pretty stressful, as can home workplace environments. But collaboration certainly happens easily in a workplace. And if you are one of those people that doesn't have a lot of self-discipline, working at home may not be a good idea. One of the real downsides of working at home is this idea of social isolation. People just hiding in their offices at home, never really getting out and socializing. Again, maybe better spaces in the workplace, but if I'm working at home, I don't necessarily have to put the suit on every day. I can wear sweats as you're sitting at your computer. But there is this idea of collegiality, social interaction. And then finally, this idea of, when do you say I'm done working? And when you're home, it's hard to put that aside. And I really do believe that we all need this period of time where we don't have to feel guilty for not working. We have to have downtime in order to be productive. So here's our ideal work-at-home environment, right? So design in the work environment is, is very influential. Poor design can really influence job satisfaction and productivity. I have designed some offices where the bosses really got this, and they were very concerned about making sure that their employees had really good places to work, good lighting, comfortable furniture, healthy work environments. And because employers invest a lot of money in training employees. And so if you can make people happy, they want to stay, you save a lot of money in that turnover. Sick building syndrome has declined quite a bit as we've become more aware of it. But, here in Justin Hall, we have a number of people not being able to use specific offices because of mold contamination. So that can be a concern. To combat the offices that might be slightly unsafe, OSHA was created, this Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970. OSHA is responsible for inspecting places of work, making sure that environments are safe, that there aren't risks for accidents and falls and things like that. So what is important to realize is that designers' ability and designers' understanding how people work and whether people are screeners or not screeners, or how multitasking really is a myth. Designers understanding these things, as well as understanding corporate culture and how offices work, how businesses work, you really can have a powerful influence on the health, safety, productivity of the office environment. In particular, things that are really critical are the right amount of lighting, views out. You know, everybody needs to be able to look away from their computer and maybe have a view to the outdoors, or a distraction that can kind of rest your, that the need to sort of refill our cups and look away from our work. Sound or acoustics are really important. Being able to hear everybody's business in an open office can be a problem. I've seen a lot of offices deal with that by having phone booths, actually, that people can use when they need to make private calls. So it just takes being smart. Ergonomics, however, is one of those things that designers really need to be advocates for physical health and well-being of office workers. You'll find often that budget sometimes overrules ergonomics, and a designer really needs to be an advocate for the worker, making sure that they have injury-free work environments, and that includes chairs that are supportive and workstations that work for all different shapes and sizes of people. And with that, we'll wrap it up. We'll see you back in class on Monday.